Heaven and Hell, the 8th and sadly final album from Canadian rock band Sum 41. One of my favourite bands of all time. Their final record came out at the top of this year, and now that it's had some time to sit with me and the initial release hype has died down, I figured it's about time to talk about it. Heaven and Hell is a double album with the first side harkening to their old school pop punk sound, that being the Heaven, and the second half being dedicated to their heavier influences. That of course being the Hell, a half and half album, which I am representing today with my half and half jacket. Much like the album being split into one side of Heaven and one side of Hell, my thoughts on it are split into some positives and some negatives. This album is not without flaw, although I will say up top, I do overall really like it. That said, there are some things that the cynic in me would like to nitpick and discuss. On the Heaven side, we have the pop punk sound, and boy does it shine through. Some of these tracks are some of the best in Sum 41's discography, in particular the opening track, Waiting on a Twist of Fate, which might be my favourite of the album overall. I've not quite ranked them all in my head, but Waiting on a Twist of Fate is one of, if not the best track on the album for me. Big thumbs up on that one. That is everything that I want from a Sum 41 song. Johnny Libertine as well, that's another of my favourites. Just great old school, upbeat, fun sound. My only complaint of that one is that it's really short. I wish it were a bit longer. That one sounds like it could have been straight off Half Hour of Power even, but with a higher production value. Really love the commitment to reigniting the old sound that they had from that era. Not Quite Myself is another standout, one that I took a little while to warm to, but I did find myself listening to that one on repeat quite a lot a few weeks ago, and it hit me where it was supposed to. That one could join the ranks of songs like Some Say, Pieces, What Am I to Say, as just really solid Sum 41 emotional ballads. Positives for the Hell side. Rise Up, phenomenal. Another great opening track to this half of the album. Another of my favourites off the album overall. The video for it as well is really great. One of the funnest music videos that I've seen from the scene in a long time. Well, that sounded funny, scene from the scene. But I always appreciate watching a music video where you can just tell that the band and everyone involved is just having a lot of fun with it. I also, as well, I enjoy a music video with a higher production value. Feel like we don't get as many of those these days, and that's fair enough. They're expensive to produce, so if it's just going to be some guys in a warehouse playing instruments, power to you. But I do appreciate that the video as well had that old school quality. It made me feel like I was watching music videos on Kerrang TV again. By the way, RIP Kerrang TV. There was a particular era where it really felt like music videos were little short films in themselves, and they had really high production value that made them stand out. And the video for Rise Up hits that mark, hits that level of quality. Sum 41 have always been a band who have fun in their videos, and it definitely shines through in that one. Now, while marketed perhaps as Sum 41 embracing their metal influences, the Hell side to me felt more like a heavier sound from Sum 41, yes, but one we had already heard in the past, harkening back to previous albums like Chug and particularly Screaming Bloody Murder, as opposed to, a part of my brain thought it might be something like a full album of Pain for Pleasure, just like full on, these are metal songs, these could be off an Iron Maiden or a Judas Priest album. It's not quite that, it's more in that Screaming Bloody Murder kind of territory. A heavier sound from the band, but one that we are familiar with perhaps a few more guitar solos thrown in than in previous songs. Speaking of, the guitar solos are very good. The one in I Don't Need Anyone blew me away first time I heard it. I felt like that meme of Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the edge, really powerful chorus. Found myself having that one stuck in my head quite a lot. The same for You Wanted War. Very good, strong, memorable hooks. I do think some of the tracks on the Hell side maybe fade into each other a little bit. Don't quite have as strong as a personality apart from each other as maybe some of the songs on the Heaven side do. It's All Me, for example. I've got the track list up and I'm looking at it just so I've got a guide to go off, and I can't quite remember what that one sounds like, so clearly not as memorable. But overall, good, solid, heavy sounds. I can happily listen to either just the Heaven side or just the Hell side on their own, and it's a great time listening to the entire album all the way through if I have enough time on a long journey, perhaps. But speaking of that fading into the background kind of thing, I think it's time to put a pin in the heaven points and start talking about some hell points. Some of the things that maybe didn't quite work as well as they could have. I think there's a little bit of an identity issue going on. I mean, Sum 41 have always been a band who've had those two sides to them, the more pop-punk sound, the more heavy influences. That's not what this is about. I think they struck the balance between those two really well and delivered solid outputs for both of those sounds. The identity issue that I refer to is more internal within the album itself. There are a few tracks, and the history of this album, for those who don't know, Derek was asked to A, write some bonus tracks for an anniversary edition of All Killer No Filler, which never ended up being released, as well as some tracks for other artists in the scene. He began writing those tracks, found that he liked them too much, didn't want to give them away or waste them on this bonus track All Killer album that was being discussed, and instead they became the basis for some of the tracks off of the Heaven side of this album. And the fact that some of these tracks began life as songs for other artists does shine through. I think you can tell. In particular, Time Won't Wait, I think, is very noticeably different from the rest of the album. It's a fine song, but to me it doesn't sound like Sum 41 in the same way that songs like Bad Mistake or Future Primitive do. It sounds closer to a more modern pop-punk MGK style track than anything from Sum 41's discography. If I were a gambling man, I would say that was one of the ones that began life as a song for someone else. I think maybe Dopamine as well, if I had to guess. I have no confirmation on any of that, that's just my own personal speculation. As well, I'm looking at the track list now and I can see that Dopamine by far has the most writers out of any track on the album. There are, there are 4 writers on Dopamine, and I think it comes through in a bad way, that it doesn't really quite sound like a Sum 41 song to me either. Dopamine and Time Won't Wait, I think, are by far the weakest on the album. Time Won't Wait in particular, I think, might be one of the weakest in Sum 41's entire discography, which is a shame to say because it's sharing space with some of the strongest in Sum 41's discography. As I mentioned, Waiting on a Twist of Fate, Johnny Libertine, Bad Mistake, those are all great tracks. Speaking of Bad Mistake, however, there is another issue at play here. That song, and another one off the album, but in particular that song, sound very similar to The Offspring, You're Gonna Go Far Kid. Now, Sum 41 have always been a band who wear their influences pretty strongly on their sleeve, sometimes too strongly. So much so that rather than influence, they end up more or less copying what has come before. Perhaps the most notable instances are this, when you're in the bitter rich, and this. Oh, what I wanna say, tell me I'm an angel, take this to my grave. When those angels come, take your life and lead you to the flames burning. I'm afraid to say Bad Mistake may be joining their ranks as one of those ones that is a little too uncomfortably close to that line between influence and plagiarism. With 1,000 eyes and a good disguise, hit 'em right between the eyes, hit 'em right between the eyes. We're just a bad mistake from a simple twist of fate, and maybe we should give in to defeat. That said, I do like the song, so, you know, there's positives and negatives. Flipping back over to the Hell side for a second, the cynic in me wants to point out, regardless of the individual quality of the songs, we did get 10 pop-punk songs on the Heaven side of the album. On the Hell side, there are another 10 songs. However, one of them is an intro interstitial track between the Heaven and Hell side, and one of them is a cover of Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. The cynic in me feels like there's a bit of an opportunity cost there. Rather than having 10 solid, heavy Sum 41 songs, 2 of those tracks get, feels a little harsh to say wasted, but I can't think of another word. They get wasted on an intro track and a cover, which means we only really get 8 heavy Sum 41 songs. I do think it's a good cover. I do like their cover of Paint It Black. However, I do think they could have also saved that one and released it as a bonus single maybe, and had another actual Sum 41 track on the album. That's just the cynic in me wanting to point that out. Both sides of the album end with an emotional ballad, Light Up the Air and How the End Begins, respectively for Heaven and for Hell. Both of them serve very nicely as a sort of emotional goodbye, both to their respective halves of the album and to the band as a whole. I like both of those tracks a lot. I can very much picture myself with my phone torch at the concert for Light Up the Air and for How the End Begins as well. That one in particular really feels like a goodbye to the band and their history, a very nice swan song to end on. As for the overall concept of the album itself being a double album, I do really like that move. I think that was a really smart decision from the band who, as I mentioned, have always had those two wolves inside of you. One's wearing a backwards cap and one's got a Slayer tank top on. But no, they've always had those two different directions, and there have been moments in their history where there's been a struggle as to finding the middle ground or picking one of those directions to go in. Splitting the difference and just making a double album to appeal to all sides of the Sum 41 fandom was a great move on their part. I think it worked well, and I also think it's a smart way to end if they're going to end the band as well. Rather than an album that may only appeal to one or the other side of their fan base, end with an album that pays homage to both sides of their history, both of the sounds that they are known for. And I, as someone who sits pretty firmly in the middle, I like the pop-punk sound and I like the heavier sound. This was a treat. This was a real treat for me. Taking a step back from my nitpicks and complaints from earlier in the video, overall, Heaven and Hell is a really solid album that I really enjoy, and I think it's a great high note for them to end the band on. Though I am saddened by the news of them breaking up, this album does quite a lot to sort of plaster the wound. So those are my thoughts on Sum 41's final album, Heaven and Hell. Let me know in the comments what you thought, what your favourite Sum 41 album or song is. If you like this video, then like it. If you want to see more from me, then subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in my next one.